Welcome to Sutures and Cents. I'm Mark Copeland. I'm the Value Analysis Whisperer. And Ryan Pistone is our producer, director, and brains of this operation. Take that any way you like. We talk business to clinical and clinical to business. And tonight, as part of our, again, I always struggle with this, as part of our summer school subject matter expert series. So summer school, Value Analysis, Summer School, as a matter of fact, subject matter expert series. Somebody should have come up with a better name. We're going to be interviewing a person who is really unique. She's one of the first clinicians and value analysis practitioners that I met strictly through LinkedIn. I've talked to dozens for years in my experience, but she was one that I talked to all the way across the country. Pam Krnavek is a former operating room nurse and still, I think, is an operating room nurse at heart, which tells you a little bit about her. And Pam now works at Peacehealth out in Oregon on the value analysis team. But before that, she worked for the largest for-profit health system in the United States in value analysis. So she marries the clinical and the business. And she actually does it as the last part of her career. She's doing it for what's called Duvera Solutions. She started a company called Duvera Solutions, who focuses on bringing high-level, highly technical value analysis capabilities to small and rural hospitals and health systems, those that probably need it the most. If you think about our current economic situation in the United States and how many of these hospitals are closing. So it's a subject very close to Pam's heart. So her name is Pam Krnavek. She's the CEO and founder of Duvera Solutions. And here's some things she's going to talk about. She's going to tell us how nurses, particularly OR nurses, are getting hammered these days, how nursing retention is a strategy that health systems are trying to tackle, how patient throughput really is important, and we'll talk about what that is, and how patient care always is number one priority, no matter what you think, your experience, your boss says. You're wrong. Patient care matters to the value analysis team, but it just can't be whatever the physician or nurse wants. Those days are gone. So let's talk with Pam Krnavek of Duvera Solutions, who lives at the intersection of clinical and business. And let's talk both topics with her. Let's start this way. The background is a lot of reps, a lot of industry people think that value analysis really just makes decisions on, they choose things that are the cheapest. Now, and we both know that's not the case, but could you talk about some of the things that you do assess as a group when you're looking at a product? And you can pick a product, whatever is most comfortable, but those things other than just acquisition price.
Well, ultimately, we're in the business of saving people's lives and getting them healthy again. I use this analogy. We're not building chairs, right? We are affecting people's lives and their families. So how the quality of care is delivered and the patient outcomes, restoring them to health as much as we can, is the number one priority. And safety in that delivery of care, where we have zero serious safety events, that zero never ever happened culture, and we're on every single thing to fix it. And in that quality of care and patient outcomes, there are the CMS core measures, which all hospitals are measured against. We have clinical excellence built around that, and it even affects our payment. If we don't hit the quality markers, we are penalized. And if we do hit the quality markers, we get a bonus. So there is the revenue piece of that. But for my organization, we care deeply about how our patients are returned to their previous life as much as possible. A part of that is, in addition to the core measures outcomes that we track, we look at their length of stay. It is a known fact that anyone who's in the hospital for an extended period of time is likely to come in contact with a microbe that we don't want them to come in contact with, um, or being in a bed and down and not able to walk, et cetera, et cetera. That affects how quickly they get well. There's so many things that are involved with length of stay. If you've ever been in the hospital, you can't get any sleep, right? It's just a disruptive
Right.
environment for someone who's sick and in the hospital. We want them home. They want to go home. And thus, it's how home health and those kinds of things have developed over the years because people recover better when they're at home. And then the last part of that quality is morbidity and mortality. We want to improve recurrence. We don't want people to have a recurrence of the illness that has brought them in the first place, and we certainly don't want a patient death associated with any care that we delivered, if at all possible. The second thing that we look at that's like not price related is efficiency. Our staff
Mm.
are overworked. We have a nursing shortage. We've done mechanical studies, and it is the amount of energy that is expended by an employee during their shift. Having things at waist level, things that are above their head, they have to reach for. If you're an OR nurse and you're on call, you're going to get hammered depending on the
Mm.
hospital that you work in if it's a trauma hospital. We look at how can we make their workload easier, fewer steps for them, um, and it's also a nurse retention strategy that they are able to do the same work with less effort. That's what we want. And we also on the expense side is we want to prevent overtime. So if we're able to get
Mm.
surgeries done faster, our physician satisfaction goes up, and we perhaps will not have to pay our staff overtime to stay past their shift to finish a procedure. Then we all have add ons, what we call patients that are in the emergency room waiting for surgery, waiting for an OR room to open up. So patient throughput is very important because, again, if you can't get them worked in during the daily schedule, somebody has to stay on overtime sometimes in order to get that patient's surgery done, and the delay of care that manifests in your inability to free up an operating room for someone. And then any procedural minutes that we gain that will then generate revenue by allowing us to do an additional procedure um, on our
Yep.
physician's block day, his block time. Can he do another surgery that has walked into his office? He needs to get into his schedule. Those things are important too. I've worked on in private practice and I've worked for hospitals, so I understand that physician component very well. Wanting to get home and have dinner with his family, for instance, and not be in clinic really late. And he's running late for all of his patients in clinic, and they're all mad at him. He has to apologize all afternoon. So that's
Yeah.
painful. So we want to help our doctors too. And then the last piece of that is GPO contract compliance. We are tracked against that when we price activate an agreement. We've made a contract with that vendor. We're going to buy X% or so many hundreds of thousands of dollars from you in this product category, and we want to honor our agreements with those vendors. And if you're coming in, or let's say you're the vendor, you want that that you can trust on your manufacturing side. People are going to have jobs. That book of business is going to be there, and all of the planning that goes on with production. You don't want another vendor to come in and upset your apple cart, so to speak.
No.
So we just when we make those commitments, we take them seriously, and our GPO tracks us, and you know they can kind of scold you if you're not if you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to use this vendor," and then you don't. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, it's funny. So Number one, you and I need to do an entire podcast on GPOs. I have so many questions to ask you, and I think you have all the answers. That's a sidebar. You just named probably 10 to 12 different things that were unrelated to cost that are extremely valuable. And I think anybody that's sitting here listening to it is nodding their head, and it confirms what we were talking about, that yeah, cost is an important component. Of course it is. It's an important component in everything. But there's so many other factors associated that um, that do matter. And people, when people hear you say it, they're going to believe it if they didn't coming into it. So, but it was interesting. You led me almost into my next question, which was great. Like, there's a lot of small, new, innovative companies coming either into healthcare or have been in it and think they have a better way to do something. And um, and I always like to ask this: is those companies that don't come in, they're not on GPO or they're not in a GPO related space, and there are certainly some of those. How should they be presenting to like your health system? Should they be coming in and talking? Like, the perfect example that I give is um, Da Vinci came to market 25 years ago, by and large, and they were they were so different, and there was a marketing component, but there was an improvement in outcomes component. There was also a big capital outlay for it. There was That was a big, complex new product to bring to a health system. So whatever the next thing is like that, how should those companies come to a health system like yours? Should they go to the clinician first? Should they come to the value analysis team, the director of supply chain?
Um,
What would you suggest?
I think if we're talking about the Da Vinci, Mark, it has to be a clinical need for it. And you've got
Mm-hmm.
physicians who are they're reading their journals and they say, oh, this would be great. We get a lot of this new technology in the electrophysiology space in the cath lab.
Right,
That
right.
technology is just really rapidly turning over. Um,
Yeah,
and each one of those devices are proprietary where you need capital in order for the device to work. And there's training and there's, you know, you've got limited real estate in the cath lab, and something is quickly being sunsetted because the technology is outpacing the life of the equipment. So you're retiring something that you only bought 2 years ago, which is a gives me a lot of heartburn, so to speak.
I can't help you with that. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I remember when the Da Vinci came in, we all just had a heart attack. So when we saw how much it cost. but
Exactly, exactly.
but now we just have to be thoughtful about it. What makes sense for us? Can we do it now? Can we do it 2 years from now because we have to budget for it? Things like that. But that's where service lines really are useful for my organization, where we have the subject matter experts coming and talking to value analysis and saying, this is the up and coming technology, this is
Hmm.
the benefits that it brings. We're like, okay, but then it's going to cost us more than we get reimbursed for it. Nobody can keep their doors open if that's the situation. And there are very few products that CMS will give you a specific code to bill for that specific item. That's rare. So you still
Right.
end up trying to incorporate the technology into your standard reimbursement for the procedure. And our, your bottom line, your margin just is constantly being eroded, especially post COVID, from inflation, transportation costs, so many things that are pressuring the organization on supply expense, and then you've got non-labor. I mean, then you've got labor expense where we've got the shortage, and so nurses are commanding a premium, so our salaries are going up as well. So when you're looking at the big sky picture, you're trying to balance the need of the surgeon, and we want to be the best in what we're delivering with the latest technology. We do. We just try to struggle sometimes, really, to try to figure out how we're going to pay for it. Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
you know, I would say also, not only do you need to talk to the doctors, but you do need to come to value analysis for the approval. So I would say that the physician and value analysis aren't on equal ground on
Yeah.
getting a new product in. Yeah, it's both. Um,
Yeah.
but you need to solve a problem that the system has, because our system, we have 10 hospitals, we have a number of urgent cares, physicians, employed physicians with clinics, long-term care, uh, and then we're really, really accelerating our ambulatory services. So you need to solve a problem that I have, and it could be
Hmm.
clinical excellence initiatives that are related to the core measures I mentioned earlier. It could be a new service line that's being built. For instance, let's just say, this that um, my health system doesn't have neurosurgery, for instance. I'm trying to build that service line. And my doctor is asking for things because he's the first person coming in our system. Am I building that service line? I'm going to want to talk to every neurosurgery vendor that's on the GPO to get price comparisons, outcomes, look at research, talk to the doctor some more. It's going to be a big discussion, because our hope is that surgeon's not going to be the only one that works for us. We're
Right.
going to expand that service line. We need to come up with what is clinically acceptable, will achieve the outcomes the surgeon needs, the bone grafts that he will use, and then we're going to want to repeat that with all surgeons coming on board in the future. Um, then
Yeah. Yeah.
procedural area, like what is our revenue and what are our billing codes? If we bring in this device, as I mentioned, will we cover the cost? Um, and have we built a new cath lab? For instance, we're doing a lot of construction right now. Do I have a new lab? Am I going to be doing more of these kinds of procedures with this cutting edge technology? What's our revenue going to look like? And what is our reimbursement? Um, and our
Yeah.
payer mix is very important. Are we commercial, Medicare, Medicaid? Who's balancing out the reimbursement? We happen to be a high Medicare, Medicaid because we take care of the poor, being a Catholic ministry.
Right.
And so we tend to benchmark the cost of the device against Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, which is really hard on a vendor. That economic pressure, because they want to pay for their R&D, right? If it's new technology, they're trying to recoup that expense.
Yeah. You know,
And I understand that. I really
you're
do.
right, but that's a vendor problem. Like that really isn't a Pam problem. Although,
Right.
if it keeps you from getting something that's trying you doing the best that you can for your patients, that's where it becomes both of you trying to solve the problem. But at the end of the day, that's a vendor problem, not a
Agreed.
Pam problem, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I try to talk to my vendors that are new, and I say, I can get X, Y, and Z um, product for, I don't tell anyone pricing, but I can tell them, I can get it for um, 50% less, or, uh, you know, I may say to them, you're so far out of the market on pricing. And I know they probably have private investors trying to get their money back as quick as they can, but healthcare um, cannot handle that kind of economic pressure. And so their device may be awesome and it solves a problem, but it's priced so far out of our reach, we cannot afford to do it because we'll be in the red for that
Yeah.
procedure.
It, if though, just to use your example for a second, if something's 50% more expensive than the sort of general market, my assumption is they better show 5x outcomes or like improve efficiencies and shorten length of stay and decrease these things,
versus their competitors who don't do it, or the like that, because you have to prove why you're so much more expensive. And it's okay. Like I tell our salespeople, it's okay to be more expensive, but you have to be much more valuable because,
Yeah,
and you got to be able to prove it and like document it and show it. And it still might not be enough for everybody, and that's all right as well, right? But I just find like so many places, so many vendors don't do that. They just say, well, they don't see the value. I'm like, well, that's not, in this case, that's not Pam's job. Like, for her to dig deep and understand the value, it's your job to make it as easy as possible. And I think many times in med tech, they've struggled to do that, right? So I know you're nodding. So I am barking up the kind of the right tree on this.
you are.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
are.
That's good.
And we have algorithms that will tell us what does a single day on length of stay cost us on overhead,
Mm,
salary, supplies, drugs, all that. We have an algorithm for that. So I can quantify if you're going to decrease my length of stay by 1 day for this DRG.
right.
Yeah, I can quantify all of that. But probably then what's going to happen next is we're going to do a product test, and the sales pitch, the
Mm.
outcome has to match the sales pitch. So do your
Yeah.
homework.
Or
Have
exceed.
your
Yeah.
exactly. Have some independent studies that it's not vendor funded because that's suspect to us. We want a white paper that says, yeah, we looked at this vendor and perhaps they looked at another vendor and they did a comparison. So you want an independent, objective opinion that this product performed
Yeah.
to match the sales
Yeah.
pitch, and then we still evaluate that. We'll do a product test and we say, okay, we're going to watch this for 30 days or 60 days. And so we'll approve a conditional. So many patients we're going to use this on and see what happens. And then we'll follow up with the doctors in the office and say, how did your patient do? It's a serious endeavor. So if you
Yeah.
get a
Yeah.
yes, you may get
Well,
a yes or you may get a conditional yes. Expect it to take time for us to prove it to our doctors and our system. It's our due diligence. We can't take
yeah.
everything on face value
Yeah.
on what the vendor tells us, unfortunately.
No. And I'm going to edit this next part out, this comment I'm about to make. But you'd be amazed at how many cool little companies I have helped. And they're like, we'll save, we'll do all this stuff. And, but like places are unfamiliar with them because they're new, right? So they don't have brand equity. They have no, and they have very few customers. And in some cases, none, right? And so, but they're so confident. And I've said to a couple of them, listen, you seem really confident. Oh, we're the best. I mean, it's just going to transform everything. It's probably, you know, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I have a customer that really wants to use it, try it, might even buy it, but they don't want to get hung out to dry because you don't have a track record. You have no sort of awareness in the market. So is it okay if I tell them that they can buy it, but we'll give them their money back in 6 months if it doesn't do what we say? And they're like, well, that's, I'm like, well, wait a minute. You just said you were super confident. You believe like it's going to transform the world. So if you're so convinced, it's a free giveaway. Like you can just say to them, yeah, if you don't like this thing, call me back and say, take this thing back and give me my money back. Because they'll never do it because you just said how great it is. And it's funny when you test their confidence and how good their product is by just saying, okay, well, I told Pam in 12 months, if this thing doesn't do what we said it would do, she can send it back and we'll refund all her money. And you should see them get nervous. I'm like, well, then let's stop expecting our customers to just trust what we say, right? Like, let's just stop right
Yeah.
now and let's come to them with something that's a little bit like they can actually test and evaluate and make an educated decision. But you wouldn't be surprised, but you might be. So
Well, I'm not
I'm going
surprised
to
because
edit that out. I just
I've
figured you'd enjoy it.
experienced it.
Yeah,
I've got one right now
yeah,
that there are other vendors in the market who do risk sharing. They believe in their product. If they don't get your outcomes where they say they can, they will cut you a check, right? Those vendors are putting their money where their mouth is. But I've got a vendor right now who failed to do the vendor support that needed to happen for the outcomes to be better. Now they owe us money and they're scrambling trying to not pay it. And so what we're going to do is remove the device altogether, which is about a $4 million book of business.
Oh, oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's going to
listen,
hurt because they're just getting
they made a
started.
commitment. Yeah,
They
they
did.
made an agreement and a commitment. Yeah, and you have to. So that's
A
interesting.
commitment. Mm-hmm.
I've liked the risk sharing models. I tried to get my years ago the spine company I was with. I tried to get them to do some of that in some places, just to be different, And they always like the idea until execution, and then like, and I'm like, all right, no. So I'm going to jump to our last question. And you and I were talking a little bit about an executive business summary and a return on the investment calculator that I think are obviously very important, the way they should be presented. But you were talking to me also about how that tied into, and I wrote it down, the sort of the 4 levels of value analysis program advancement. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because I found it very interesting, and I think you're going to teach me something. So that's good.
Um, there's four levels of on the value analysis maturation scale of from infancy to best in class. You know,
Mm.
low, medium, high, best in class, and then we have a future state that we're all aspiring to. You will find, depending on the size of the IDN, or if it's a rural hospital you're talking to, uh, you're going to find different levels of value analysis program development. Um, and at the larger the IDN, the more structure you're going to find around the process. Um, but where we are is we look at the evidence. What is the research? Um, what are we trying to achieve here? What problem do we have? Are we above or below the national benchmark on outcomes? Those kinds of things are serious, and we're looking at products. Can you help us get there? That's where we want to be. There's leapfrog scores. There's HCAP scores. There's so many things that we um, ascribe to that are publicly reported to show how our outcomes measure up. And we want people to choose our health system.
Mm-hmm.
We want them to feel welcome and cared for, and their families attended to properly, and keeping them informed, and all those things. They roll into those kinds of scores, right? So, whenever you're looking at the value analysis package, that you're trying to get this new product in to help health systems with these variable scores that they are looking to achieve, you have to plan, I think, for the highest level. And I think if you do that, and prepare your value analysis package appropriately, then no matter the sophistication or at whatever level the value analysis program is, it's going to be, will give you a higher rate of success, I think. Your value
Mm-hmm.
analysis people will clearly appreciate it. And I think at some levels, you will actually give them information that they didn't know they needed. So that helps them grow as you're putting this high level information in front of them. They're like going, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Well, I
Yeah.
think I want to chase this a little bit more. And you get the committee more engaged, and they go, this is very interesting. This company has done their homework. They've looked at my GPO pricing. They've provided me with some independent research. They've given me an ROI calculator, and all I have to do is type in my confidential pricing. We do have things called local tiers on the GPO, which we could talk
Mm-hmm.
about, Mark, on a different call. But I could put
Yeah.
in my pricing, and I can quickly see what my ROI is on the financial side. Then I have some other work I would want to do. I would talk to my revenue integrity. What is my margin? Can I afford this? There's so many things that we ask for from the vendor. We wanted the 510K information so we can look it up. We will go look at the mod database and see if there's any problems with this device before we bring it in.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of groundwork that we do, but anything that a vendor could give us that would give us a leg up, since we have limited bandwidth and we have vendors knocking on our door 5 days a week, we have to pick and choose who are we going to spend our time with that's actually going to solve some of the system problems I mentioned, and
Well,
give us tools that we can use. And then it would be repeatable for the vendor, no matter who they're presenting to, they'll already have the best package out there to present their product. And, Mark and you and I were talking earlier about the independent sales rep who represents a number of companies. You're doing a pitch and you find out that the system has a problem that you could solve with another product you've got in your bag. If you've got this level of sophistication, you could quickly put in front of me, hey, I've got this other thing, and then you've got a sales opportunity there that you didn't
yeah.
know you had when you came in. And if you've got that level of sophistication already built and ready to roll, you can step into that opportunity and give me something that I'd like to know more about.
Yeah. Well, that's such a good explanation and such good guidance.